Matt Bomer. You star in the new independent film Walking Out, which is about a father and a son hunting in the Montana wilderness. First of all, what made you want to get involved in this film?
Well, I grew up in a house full of outdoorsmen, and the type of male bonding exhibited in the film, my dad was a big John Wayne fan, so I'm not going to say that he was exactly like Cal, but he wasn't that severe by any means. But that type of sort of outdoorsmanship and sort of male bonding through quiet and a lot of unspoken connection and not really sure how to connect was something that I understood from my childhood. And I thought that they were able to tap into it in a really profound way in the script. And it was about that sort of lack of connection between fathers and sons. And then how do you, in what moments do we actually connect, and what moments do we try to connect in ways that maybe don't really land.
And it's based on a short story by David Quammen, and the film does kind of retain a lot of the feel of a short story. Were you familiar with that story before you took part in the film, or did you read it once you took the part, or afterwards?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it was the first thing I did when Brunson told me about the project. I think I read the short story before I read the script, because I was on a out of town doing press for a movie, and he said, "Hey, I have a script for you. I think you really like." And so the first thing I did was read the short story, and I was really blown away by it. And my understanding is that it's really regarded as one of the great American short stories, and as required reading in a lot of English courses across the country.
And, did that feel like a lot of pressure then to try and execute this film on the big screen?
I mean, I think everything, it always feels like a little bit of pressure when you're doing a movie, regardless of whether there's source material or not. The script from Alex and Andrew Smith was so strong and so specific that it wasn't, it was actually freeing as an actor as opposed to confining, or it took the pressure off in many ways because it was so strong.
Now, you mentioned you grew up with outdoorsmen, but this character does feel like a bit of a departure from some other roles that you've played in your career that you've been known for, who've been more cosmopolitan,
Sure.
city folk, for want of a better phrase. How different was it to kind of get into this character's shoes compared to other roles that you've played before?
Oh, well, the funny thing is that this character in this world is much closer to my experience of growing up than white collar or anything that is could be perceived as more cosmopolitan. For better or for worse, you whatever that first role is that endears you to the public in some way, however it's marketed, tends to be how people's first impression and their understanding of you. And it's always kind of a challenge as an actor, because you can make a career out of that if you want to. I mean, it was funny when I first started White Collar, I'd get these scripts and they'd say things to me like, "Listen, got a great idea. He's a con man, but he's helping the FBI." And so you have the option to sort of go that route or go with something different. So it's always been interesting to me that the public has viewed me as someone who is wearing well-tailored suits and having a martini in Manhattan. I'm not. I mean, I've been able to get into the more sartorial aspect of things through that character, but my experience growing up was much closer to Cal and David than it was to living the high life in New York City.
And since you did have some experience with this kind of character in your own personal experience and upbringing, did you have to do a lot of research or training or any other kind of prep work in terms of how this character is an experienced hunter and an outdoorsman and a tracker? Like, how much of that did you have to learn?
Well, it's specific to Montana. So I knew a good deal of it from growing up, but one of the first things I did was fly to Montana to meet Alex and Andrew, and we went on a fishing trip together. We went on a hunting trip with some local guides, and they sort of walked me through the you know, just being in their presence was very informative in terms of the mindset of the outdoorsmanship in Montana. And they are an incredible people there historically. I mean, you want to talk about some people who lived through some really rough winters and really pulled themselves up by the bootstraps and were real survivors. Not now, obviously. We've you know, it's a beautiful place and a great place to vacation and all that. But I'm talking about the real Montanans, the initial settlers of that state, and there is that sort of tenacity in their blood. And so getting to spend the time with them was really informative. And they, you know, it was really about the script and what kind of hunting were we doing in the script, and how would you track an elk, and how would you track a moose, and what's the difference, and what would be the telltale signs you'd be looking for, and how do you hunt grouse? I went on a grouse hunting trip with these gentlemen. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times you can learn as much from just being in the presence of the real people and seeing their rhythms, the natives, and seeing their rhythms and how their minds work. You can learn as much from that as you can from, you know, the hunting trip itself.
And the film, the characters, you and your on-screen son, played by Josh Wiggins, encounter a lot of hardship and a lot of struggle out in the wilderness. Was it an especially physically demanding shoot, or was it relatively painless?
It definitely wasn't painless. You know, I think when you do these films, you know, I've done a few of these, you know, smaller indies now where you really don't know what to expect. All you know is that you love the story so much and you love the characters so much that you want to be there regardless. And this was not the type of set where we were going to be coddled in any way. I mean, there were no trailers, there were no cast chairs, there were no apple boxes. You stood in the snow in between takes and got ready for the next scene. And I wouldn't have had it any other way, to be honest with you, because we were able to shoot it somewhat sequentially. And so it really helped us create an immersive environment for our characters where you just got to behave in the circumstances that were given to you. You were in that cold, you were in that snow, you were dealing with those elements. And, you know, they let me take my little Sidney Lumet 20-minute nap at lunchtime and I was good to go. So I kind of like those types of opportunities, because in some ways I prefer that to big studio movies where you go back to your trailer and you're waiting for 2 hours for them to light a scene, and then you come back and you're like, where was I in the scene and what's going on? Or you're in front of a blue screen or whatever it may be, and you're having to imagine that there's whatever around you. You know, I found it, particularly in terms of the naturalism that they're going for in the film, to helpful to me as an actor, to that it was painful. And we were well looked after. I mean, nobody got hypothermia or anything. We had strategically placed, you know, little stick-on heat pads and things like that. So it was never life-threatening or anything like that. But it was beautiful. I mean, some of the places we got to go on that mountain, they weren't really sure. We had to take a snowmobile up, and those drifts where Josh is carrying me that are 3 or 4 feet deep, they weren't really sure the last time humans had been up there. So getting to see that kind of pristine beauty was really incredible.
And the film is also unique in that it is mostly a two-hander between you and Josh Wiggins. Was that itself a unique part of this acting experience, to take on this, you know, almost entirely two-character story that's so intimate?
Yeah, I mean, it's so rare that you ever see a two-hander on screen, and I'm wrong to call it a two-hander, because there are other actors in the film, obviously, who are all wonderful and incredible. Bill Pullman, everyone in the film is great, but it is primarily about that one relationship. So in a way, it was kind of helpful, because it was really just Josh and I bonding together and hanging out together and talking about the scenes, and Josh and I really being able to bond and create a relationship and just have fun and get to know each other in a way that sometimes you don't get to with other co-stars when, you know, it's moving from character to character, scene to scene. And so that was great. But I you know, I did have a concern because I don't see a lot of two-handers in the theater. So I thought, oh man, we really, that did put pressure on, because I thought we really have to sell this relationship and this story, or the movie's not happening. It's not going to work. So I definitely felt pressure in that regard.
Now, did you and Josh Wiggins have any kind of rehearsal or prep time before shooting to start to develop that rapport, or was it all on set?
None, zero. We met, and you know, within an hour or whatever it was, we were doing that scene where we're walking by the river and he's trying to hunt grouse and can't hit one. So it was immediate. But the nice thing was that we both come from the same small town in Texas outside of Houston. And Alex and Andrew, the directors and the producer, didn't know this when they hired me, that we happened to be from the same small town. He calls it Cypress. I still call it Spring. But it's the same little city outside Houston in Texas. So I think just having that shared sense of home was really helpful to us in terms of breaking down barriers. And Josh is an unbelievable actor. I think he's a superstar. He looks like a combination of a young Matt Damon and a young Leonardo DiCaprio, and he just has this great thing that you can't really teach. He's so intuitive, and he has a great lack of self-awareness that you need, and lack of vanity that you really need, but it's hard to find in younger actors. And so, man, I was learning from him, watching him.
Another major element of the story is the relationship between Cal and his father, who we see played in flashbacks by Bill Pullman. And for the most part, those scenes, there's another actor playing a younger version of Cal. But were you still able to draw from those?
Alex Newstetter, I think his name is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but were you still able to draw from those scenes and that part of the story and that relationship to inform your performance, even though you weren't acting with Bill Pullman for the most part?
Oh, absolutely. That relation and so central to his struggle in the piece. It was all about his relationship to his father and trying to pass on those ideals, however imperfectly, to his son, those tenets, those principles to his son that were given to him by his father. And so that was, so central to everything about that character. So yeah, I definitely drew on those and probably some of my life experience as well.
The visual style also is such a big part of the film, capturing not just the beauty, but also really the fearsomeness of this physical landscape. And you got the cinematography by Todd McMullen, of course, the direction by Alex Smith and Andrew J. Smith that contributes to that. What was it like shooting compared to actually seeing the visual quality of the film and the finished product?
Well, I knew that Todd was an incredible cinematographer. I'd seen some of his work on Friday Night Lights and some other things, and so I was so excited about this opportunity for him, and I knew he was just going to do a fantastic job. But I didn't have a real sense of the scope because they had a whole other unit that was doing that aerial photography, which is a big part of the movie, and so I had no idea that we were ever going to be that wide, like planet Earth, Richard Attenborough wide. So that was a really nice surprise when I first saw the film. I had seen some stills. I'm not a big fan of watching playback unless the director wants me to. I'm always happy to do it, but typically I like to just do the work and then see what happens later. But we had seen some stills and they were so beautiful, particularly one of Josh and I were around the campfire talking at night. And I thought, oh my gosh, this looks like a Norman Rockwell painting. And so I knew he was doing an amazing job. I didn't realize how incredible it was and how central it was to make Montana a character in the story until after I finally saw the finished product.
And what was it like working with those directors, given that it's such an intimate kind of story between, you know, these two characters, and so much of the story is really happening on the actors' faces? That seems like it must have been an especially close collaboration.
Absolutely, and it's fascinating to work with twin brothers as directors. I have twins they're 9 years old, but so I was very familiar with a lot of dynamics between twins, and they do a really great job. I mean, they're so cinematically versed, and so their influences in the cinema are such beautiful influences. The directors and the films they love, and their nuance and the way they're able to talk to actors is so specific and great. And you know, and a lot of times they would divide and conquer. You know, one brother would talk to me, Alex would usually talk to me, or you know, Andrew would talk to Josh. It just depended on the day. And sometimes they would have to go and have a little twin talk and figure out exactly what they wanted and then come back and present it to us. So it was really extraordinary to watch them work. And it really incentivized me as an actor, because these are two people who are artists to their core, who are really want to make art and cinema, and are not in it for some kind of commercial glory or to be famous. They're really telling the stories for the right reason. And so when I saw that in them and I got to know who they were, it made me want to dig deeper as an actor for them.
And speaking of directing, you got a project coming up where you'll actually be making, I believe, your directing debut with American crime story Versace coming up early next year. What first inspired you to go behind the camera like that?
Well, I'm actually directing as we speak, which is why I'm rolling on about 3 hours of sleep from last night. So I'm surprised I can formulate complete sentences. You know, it's one of those things. Ryan Murphy called me, and as he's done so many times in my career, very generously reached out with an opportunity. And he knew that I loved actors. He knew that I worked very diligently on the material that I was given, for better or for worse, and that I was kind of a student, and you know, I always had my spiral notebook with 150 notes and 7 different colors of highlighter on my script. And so I think he saw something in me where he thought that I could direct. And it was a really incredible and scary proposition that I was incredibly grateful for. And I just started studying right away. I mean, I was doing The Last Tycoon and reading, you know, about film technique at the same time, and I was able to shadow a lot of the incredible directors like Gwyneth Payton and Dan Minahan, who they have on the show, and who are just, you know, superb at what they do. And you know, when you have an incredible crew like that, it's a really, you know, it's a big place to start, but it's also, you have a lot of help around you.
And now that you're doing it, is this something that, you know, as you're experiencing it, you think you might like to do again, or are you like, no, I'm good. This is.
Yeah, actually, some other opportunities have come my way. I think, you know, first of all, I got completely inceptioned. Like, it turned my world inside out in terms of being an actor, because you learn so much more about what goes on behind the scenes as a director, and exactly what every single person is doing. You have a general idea. You know, I've been doing episodic for almost 20 years, so you have a general idea what everybody does, but it's a completely different experiential thing when you're a director. And so I'm so looking forward to taking what I learned from that as an actor and applying it as an actor. In terms of directing, yeah, I mean, I would love to stay in the Ryan Murphy world, to be honest with you. It's like a family to me. He has been, you know, in many ways, an architect of my career. So I know a lot of the crew. You know, some of them I've worked with on Glee, some of them I'd worked with on The New Normal, some of them I'd worked with on American Horror Story, some of them I worked with on Normal Heart. So you know, it's just kind of one big family that he's got going, which I think is always a really nice thing to walk into. And other than that, it's just got to be a story like this that I really feel that passionate about. Directing is a really all-consuming job, and acting often is too. But it's you're the first one there and the last one to leave. So if it's not a story that you feel passionate about, or a show that you feel passionate about, then I can't foresee the time involved and the intellectual and emotional effort involved to being worth it. You know, it has to be something you really love.
And you know, without giving too much away, I mean, this is a known story, the Versace murder. But what can audiences expect from this next season of American Crime Story?
Oh my gosh, so many things. I wish I could. I wish I had one perfectly encapsulating statement to make. It's what blew me away is how much I didn't know. I mean, granted, I was a kid living in, you know, suburban/rural Texas at the time and was pretty sheltered. And all I knew is that this incredible genius had been killed by someone, and possibly a hustler. I wasn't really sure what was going on. And this dives so deep into, I mean, I think you know, a lot of the question is, you know, what made these two people who they were and how did they intersect and why? And I can't really say much more than that, but it really is almost like, you know, a bunch of little movies. They almost each kind of stand on their own in a way. And but man, it answers so many questions that I never knew about. I didn't know about Andrew's history. I didn't know how Gianni became Gianni and all that. So I think I'm excited for people to see it.
Well, congratulations on Walking Out and on American Horror Story or American Crime Story, Versace. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Daniel, thank you so much. Thank you for, you know, I know these are little movies, but you put as much love and heart into these little ones as you do the big ones. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this one.
Yeah, and the little ones are honestly, you know, you don't need anyone to help sell Harry Potter, but you know, it's always nice to be able to get to talk about one of these little labors of love that really make a big impact.
Yeah, hope so. Thank you so much. Take